Welcome everyone, this is Tactical here, and today we are back to another hybrid battle showcase with yours truly bringing a Khorne army facing up Strat Games' Nurgle army. Now, traditionally, this is a very bad matchup for Khorne in land battles because Nurgle has all the tools it needs to counter the offensive power of a Khorne army. With the front line, we have the Forsaken of Nurgle here mixed in with Spawn of Nurgle as well as some Nurglings. Now, they are not exactly primarily armor-piercing, but with the support of cultists of Nurgle providing that armor-sundering, this is exactly what they need for their non-armor-piercing weapon strength to dish out massive damage against the heavy tin cans, the warriors of Khorne. Supporting the whole fight, we have a lot of single entities, which is almost impossible for the Khorne army to kill off. We have, other than the double cultists of Nurgle, who also bring in the Plaguebearer summons, we have the Beasts of Nurgle providing that melee attack debuff with the Slime Trail, a -5 melee attack, and then we have a Great Unclean One, a leadership of Exalted Great Unclean One. A powerful Greater Demon with a versatile toolkit with the melee defense debuff to overcome the higher melee defense of the Khorne warriors. And then there's the Stream of Corruption doing 100% armor-piercing damage, wreaking havoc amongst my Khorne warriors, and then Flashy Abundance to heal up the friendly units, Furtive Stench, a leadership debuff that synergizes with Terror, which is the greatest counter against a Khorne army, as the Khorne offensive power basically got debuffed to the equivalent of a wet cardboard by the poison as well as other Nurgle abilities, and are dragged into a fight of attrition, giving the Great Unclean One plenty of time to drain their health. Now, for the Khorne army that I'm playing, honestly, I do not have a lot of solutions against the survivability and single entity spams of the Nurgle army. We have a front line of Chaos Warriors of Khorne, a back line of Blood Crushers and Mobility, hoping to use these Chaos Warriors who are bringing Axe and Shield, hoping to get a little bit more melee defense to hold the line, allowing the Blood Crushers and the Khorne Flash Hounds to do some rear charges, hoping to eliminate the infantry and monster support for the single entities. In this little forest here, we also have our secret weapon, the Chaos Warhounds. Actually, I only brought them because I have a few hundred gold left for a spare change, so I just spent them on a random hound unit. And to wrap up the army composition, a single Exalted Bloodthirster is leading the Khorne army. And now let's go into combat and see if the hybrid game mode can balance the extreme disadvantage of the Khorne forces against Nurgle army. With so many Blood Crushers, I am absolutely lacking funds in the infantry department. All these Blood Crushers costing 1,400 gold each, combined with the over 3,000 gold cost of the Exalted Bloodthirster. Most of my funds are in these expensive units, and all I can afford for infantry are, well, 3 of the cheapest warriors of Khorne, the most basic Axe and Shield Chaos Warriors. And with only such a meager infantry force, there's no way I can counteract all these spam of Forsaken, Chaos Spawns, and of course the single entities. And my opponent Strat Games knows that very well, and he is just driving forward with his entire blob of Nurgle forces straight towards my infantry forces. And I also noticed that I am no match for him in terms of the infantry power. So I'll be dropping some breath attacks with my Exalted Bloodthirster and trying to get my Blood Crushers and Corn Dogs into position, hoping to get a rear charge. But with all these impassable terrain, these 2 ridges in the middle of the map, basically blocking all kinds of flanking maneuvers, I can't really flank them before they charge into the rear of my army. And so I'll be pulling back some of my infantry, but with the Forsaken and Chaos Spawns having 42 speed, they can certainly outrun my 28 speed Chaos Warriors of Khorne, and so I'll be forced to take these engagements as the Forsaken and Spawns are driving forward into the face of these Chaos Warriors. On this flank, the warriors are able to pull back a little bit further before engaging. Same goes for these Chaos Warriors, and my Corn Dogs will be flanking around, hoping to get into the rear, while the Chaos Warhounds will be sneakily capping one objective here as soon as the objective unlocks. But in the front line, the engagement has begun. My mobility aren't in position right now. Some of them taking the long way around to get into the rear, and some of them not exactly getting the opening they need until right now, and they need to charge in soon. But with the Forsaken here doing some poison damage to debuff my attacks, as well as the Chaos Spawns just holding the front line for Papa Nurgle, it is rather difficult for my mobility to charge in without being tangled upon by the enemy units. Just like these Blood Crushers charging in but now being pinned by some of the Spawn of Chaos, being stuck in this prolonged melee which they most certainly do not want to be in. Crushed by the big bells of the Great Unclean One alongside some Flesh Hounds. Also with the Cultists of Nurgle dropping in those Plague Bearer summons, providing a lot of meat shields, making my charges a lot less effective. Yes, I am doing some great damage against the spawns and some of the Forsaken, but the single entities are still really healthy. Now, with the Exalted Bloodthirster dropping down onto the ground, smashing apart some of the Nurgle forces, but the counterattack from the Exalted Great Unclean One would be a great problem, as well as the Blight Swarm lowering his melee defense, making him very vulnerable to counterattacks, while some of my Blood Crushers now also infected with the Blight Swarm lowering their melee defense, and then the Poison lowering their speed and weapon damage, allowing the Forsakens, the Chaos Spawns to survive a little longer, and also that means more time to drag down all my elite Blood Crushers. Don't forget, the Exalted Great Unclean One has been draining the health from this entire blob, accumulating noticeable damage on the Khorne warriors over time as the direct health drain ignores their heavy armor and high melee defense. On the other flank, my Chaos warriors have been routed down to 29 models less than 1.5k HP. My Khorne forces are running out of steam, and if there is a balance of power bar right now, it would be most certainly dominated by the color red. Thankfully, despite I'm losing on infantry right now, the Plague Bearer summons are slowly running out. And with some breath attacks dropped from the Bloodthirster, these remaining Forsakens are being thinned down, but with only one relatively healthy Chaos Warriors of Khorne still remaining, I am running out of anchor and anvil for the hammer of these Blood Crushers and Flesh Hounds to smash in, and even if they can do the rear charges, they will be relatively ineffective against the single entities who are really tanky and lacks the area of contact from all these multi-entity units. With all the single entities collapsing onto one single warrior's unit, this final unit of Khorne warriors are buckling from the pressure, being hacked down by all the single entities, especially the big fat Great Unclean One in the middle. The Blood Crushers are slowly being whittled down by the armor-piercing attacks of the Greater Demons, and the Bloodthirster desperately trying to charge in and dumpster some of these single entities. Well, he is not exactly having the best time here. Yes, there is some charge bonus buffs for his unit, but with all these single entities just absorbing the hits from the Exalted Bloodthirster, the Exalted Great Unclean One isn't taking that much damage, and this whole entire blob with the melee defense debuff, yet again the Blight Swarm really potent, spreading to the entire blob, making them vulnerable to attacks from even the lowliest cultist. Especially now that they are a lot less tanky due to the armor sundering from the cultists themselves, down to 70 armor. They are taking a lot more weapon damage from all these single entities surrounding them. Now the Exalted Great Unclean One got hit by a Bellow of Fury from the Exalted Bloodthirster, but not exactly a greatest effect, and I'm losing a lot of my mobility in this prolonged melee fight. On the other hand, Bloodthirster are still roaming around the battlefield trying to use their mobility to chase off some of the regrouped Forsaken, and at this point I realize I am running out of troops to continuously engaging in this entire blob fight. The single entities are too much for my cavalry and Khorne dogs to deal with, and my anchor, the warriors of Khorne, are being routed right now, and most of my mobility are heavily damaged, scattered around the battlefield. All I have remaining on the battlefield are some really healthy Chaos Warhounds capturing a second objective. They have already captured the third objective, and now I am going to have a control of two objectives, and also some of these routed Chaos Warriors will be running over to Objective 1, hoping to capture them. Now my opponent only having the single entity blob remaining. This is actually my only way to come back to this game, as my Bloodthirster is no match for 5 single entities plowing onto him, and my mobility are no match for the prolonged melee fight against a bunch of Great Unclean Ones, the Beasts of Nurgle, lowering their melee attack and whatnot, and then also the Armor Sundering from the double cultists. And so I do have to go for the capture strategy right now, especially with my opponent not having any units to counteract my capture strategy. My mobility are too fast for them to catch, so my opponent trying to just converge all the forces into objective 2, but with myself having the lead in the objective, they have to split at some point to capture multiple objectives in order to deny me from that ticket victory. Now in the middle with Strat Games occupying the objective with all his single entities, I have pushed in some Flash Hounds, but then I'll be quickly pulling them back as soon as the single entities advance, just so to keep my opponent's attention occupied on my mobility. To break this stalemate, my opponent Strat Games decided to divide some of the forces, 1 Beast of Nurgle, 1 Cultist, and 1 Great Unclean One, slowly moving away, hoping to bait me into a charge to focus down these exalted Great Unclean One, and they are still able to return and support right now. But I am patiently waiting as the units will eventually get way too far to come back for reinforcement. And now this is where I go in with the mobility surrounding my opponent's forces, surrounding the exalted Great Unclean One, and then charging in with the exalted Bloodthirster. Despite being hit by the Blight Swarm and the weapon damage debuff from the poison, the almighty exalted Bloodthirster with all his toolkit activated, Deathbringer buffs, the charge bonus from the other ability, is just dumpstering this exalted Great Unclean One, and without the other single entity supporting, the exalted Great Unclean One isolated, surrounded by all these magic attacks, Blood Crushers, and the fire attacks, limiting the regeneration potential of the unit. Even if he can drop in a heal for himself, there is basically no way for them to come back, as the one single cultist of Nurgle cannot hold back this whole tide of tattered but still kicking mobility of Khorne, and the Great Unclean One, despite the flashy abundance, will be focused down soon by the exalted Bloodthirster. And on the far flank, the single entities are just barely able to capture this third objective, but I am taking a huge lead in terms of victory tickets, while the Nurgle forces, the Great Unclean One is being dropped. Without the leadership, there's basically no hope for the single entities to fight back, as the healing factor is basically gone. The cultists of Nurgle will be routed, being surrounded by Flash Hounds and Bloodthirster. In the far side, the Great Unclean One, cultists, and the Beast of Nurgle slowly waddling, trying to go back to the second objective, but it is too little too late at this point. There is no way for Nurgle to overtake me in tickets, and Strat Games decided to throw in the towel. This battle came from a game of Best of 3 I played against Strat Games. We have other games played and they were great as well, but I feel like this one game showcased how hybrid game mode can influence the meta, especially with the limitations to single entity spams. Just like here in this battle, the Nurgle army is spamming a bunch of single entities, the double Great Unclean One, double Cultist, and a single Beast of Nurgle. It is a really strong tactic, since single entities are great in both land battles and domination. For land battles, we have seen how powerful single entity squads can be in Game 1 and Game 2, and for domination, with the focus on small scale engagements, single entities as a really cost-effective option to compact a lot of fighting power into a single package. It is still a dominant strategy in the new domination game mode, but in hybrid battle, things are a lot more different, where single entities are no longer as powerful as before with the introduction of the capture points and the fact that they are fighting a full-scale army battle. First of all, single entities do not have that much capture power, and in the end you can see that the Nurgle army simply cannot compete with my mobility in terms of capturing objectives and winning the tickets. And secondly, with no way to call in reinforcements, the single entities actually ran out of supporting troops in the end, as the Forsakens and Spawns got killed off by my mobility cycle charging, as well as the Exalted Bloodthirster. And the isolated single entities actually fight a lot less effective. And the fact that they are fighting a full-scale army means that they do not have the kind of advantage they have over small-scale combat, as their opponents having a full-scale army more or less have a rather equal footing. In the end, the Nurgle army not able to do too much damage other than relying on the Exalted Great Unclean One draining all the health of my Khorne units, and lacking the infantry and mobility to capture objectives, was not able to drag itself to victory with the single entity spams. Well, if this was in a land battle, I'll be forced to fight all these clumped up single entities, unable to force them separate, and basically lose out on the grind, as all 5 single entities will be converging onto a single Exalted Bloodthirster, really putting in the pain on the greater demon of Khorne. Especially with my opponent's strat games really noticing the strength of his build, pushing forward aggressively with the spawns and Forsaken, pressuring my front line, forcing me to commit early into the fight, as I would not be able to commit any forces to go for early captures, because if I give up on the Chaos Warriors of Khorne, I will basically lose all my anvil, and the mobility have nowhere to hammer home. So I must commit all my forces into a hammer and anvil charge, hoping to thin out their forces early game, and this is exactly what the Great Unclean One needs for the Mortis Engine effect to drain all the health of my units. Still, I was able to kill off all the supporting units and then go for a late game capture and pull out ahead, especially with my opponent forced to separate the Great Unclean One and some of the cultists, and in the end the Exalted Bloodthirster, getting that perfect charge on the Exalted Great Unclean One, managed to snipe out the most important part of the Nurgle army and secure a victory. And the rest of my mobility not doing a lot of good damage due to how tanky the single entities are. But this is a game that you win by capture points and not killing power, and as such, my opponent's army heavily relying on single entities lost in the objective game, and in the end lose out the battle as well. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this battle. Personally, I really like this hybrid game mode, especially with the nerf to a lot of cheesy strategies, just like the single entity spams being limited in this particular game, and also the fact that you don't need to enforce any rules to limit corner camping or draw kiting makes the whole game a lot smoother and a better experience. And I would really love to see more of these games being played in the community. Anyways, that is all for now. I hope you enjoyed the battle. If you do, remember to hit the like and subscribe to stay up to date on any new videos I upload to the channel, covering more battle replays, sometimes new wild army builds, and sometimes tips and strategies for Total Warhammer multiplayer. And if you have any replays that you want to showcase, feel free to join my Discord or send me a replay or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check them out. And yeah, that's basically it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.